You're listening to the Omni Athlete Podcast, your source of peak performance techniques and actionable practices from the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Join host Rich Walkoff, longtime NFL sportscaster for the San Francisco 49ers, on a journey to access your peak performance state and unlock sport as a transformational human experience. Welcome to Omni Athlete.
You know, it's fascinating to get a chance to talk with a guy who has lived it as a counselor, as a coach, as an athlete, as a student of the mastery of sports and sports psychology. So, Greg Warburton, welcome to the Omni Athlete. Nice to have you on board today.
Rich, thank you very much. I appreciate getting to join, and I certainly appreciate getting to visit with you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you have a book which highlights the State of the Union, and it's not the presidential address that comes every 4 years in the inauguration, but this is about the merging and the melding of the body and the mind. So why don't we start off with that rather grandiose topic?
Yeah, I have been paying attention to, because I've been a mental health counselor for 35 years, the field of psychology, and then a lifelong athlete, so I'm always involved in sports, but have not been directly involved until about a decade ago. And I chose to re-enter the world of sports, having been given an opportunity to introduce some sports psychology methods at Oregon State University by the pitching coach then in 2006, Dan Spencer. And I was surprised to learn as I come back into sport that what I talk about kind of the State of the Union is just that idea that what has gone on in the field in the 30 years that I was not participating in sport, going back to my high school days with the father as a coach and teacher. And back in my day, mental training was about two words: get tough and play. And the State of the Union then it began with advice, no methods. And so I come in about 10 years ago, and in mainstream sport, I'm a bit surprised to see that there's still a lot of advice giving, on target advice, like be mentally tough, play with confidence, keep your emotions off the court or field. But then there was the buying of athletes who believed that was important, but they didn't know what to do. So they might say to coach, I want to be able to do that. How do I do it? And often the coach would say, just do it. And nothing against the coaches. They have a lot of other jobs. So it's just about this gap. And so my job, I saw, was to bridge the gap of advice only and add some methods. And for me, they're practical, applicable, learnable, quick methods. So that's what I've been doing the last 10 years. And I guess I would just add that as I watched the sports psychology field for the last 40 years, it's still really pretty much cognitive based, meaning thinking. So the focus, there's some important practices from a thinking standpoint, like paying attention to, as they say, self-talk and changing it. But then I'm wanting to fill this gap, and I'm excited about what we're doing at SEC of bridging body-mind and with methods. So that's where I'm at now and why I wrote the book I wrote.
You know, the dual paradigm from the old school, just as you point out, try harder, be focused, give me your best, toughen up. All those old school mantras have been replaced by, as I call it, the new paradigm, and just compare and contrast the stark differences between the two.
Well, it begins with advice, and the advice is okay because it's accurate. We do want tough, competitive athletes, but the contrast is people aren't being taught what to do or how to do it. So this idea of mental and adding emotional aspect, mind and body, is filling the void of how to address performance struggles with methods that work to get people in and out of slumping performances, for example. And so it's a focus on mind-body, not mind only, and it's a focus on mental and emotional, not physical training only.
When you say mental training, you've got to, expand upon that, because that's the key thing. We watch great athletes in all endeavors, and what separates the winners from the losers, from triumph and defeat, is not generally the guy who is the bigger, stronger, or faster, but the athlete who can maximize his performance in the most critical of times. And that may mean being as focused, as measured, and as composed in those tense, dramatic moments.
Absolutely. And I think that is what's beginning to happen. The one point of agreement is that the mental aspect of sport performance absolutely matters. Nobody argues with that. And the good news is now we know what to do for that with actual skill. I talk about, I play with phrases like mental emotional self-management practice, mental emotional fitness, mental conditioning. So they are actual practices. And I talk about diligently practicing the skills that you can learn to mentally, emotionally self-manage just as diligently as physical skills. And oh, by the way, mental training is fun when you know what to do in practice. And so we could talk a little bit about what some of the practices are, what a starting place can be for sustaining a key mental focus from start to finish.
Well, absolutely. I mean, please go into that, because that's the crux of it. And we all think of how many, you're going to do wind sprints, you're going to do weight training, you're going to do flexibility, but it's the mental training that often separates those who smile at the end of a competition and those who are, going home kicking dirt, right?
Absolutely. So I sometimes talk about an ideal starting place, which is surprising to people. And this applies. And the other thing I would highlight is we can make psychology and motivation, achievement, personal change simpler. And so a starting place, imagine if an athlete comes up to you and says, Rich, I really want to learn how to become skilled at mental training, the mental side of sport. Where do I start? How do I get started? My answer to that, which I write about in my system, is begin by generating awareness, by practicing what I call the courage of self-honesty. And what does that mean? It means the first job, you cannot know what you want to do about your performance if you don't presently notice how you're thinking, feeling, and behaving as you perform. So the beginning place is begin to, I called it self-honestly self-observe 30 years ago. Now it's more trendy to say mindfulness, but it's beginning to catch the thought, feeling, experiences you're holding and having related to your sports performance. So the athlete who catches the thought, don't miss that free throw, don't overthrow the pass, those kinds of thoughts, can catch those. Catching them means noticing them, becoming aware, and then changing them. And then it is key to talk about, you can't just notice them, you have to actually replace them. On the other side of the coin, which is paying attention to what I call creating power or positive performance phrases. And so that's related to how you do want to perform.
You've talked to me before about the brain's inability to recognize or accommodate negative affirmations, like you just alluded to. I don't want to miss this free throw. I've got to be more. I don't want to overthrow the receiver. Or I don't want to throw this ball forward to a pitcher at the plate batting. Whereas you exchange that with the positive affirmation. And tell me why that's so much more effective, and what your transformational mental training tools, where they come into play with that.
The key to that is you're paying attention from a mental focus standpoint on how you do want to perform a skill or perform in that moment. And it's very important for young athletes and coaches to begin to learn that the thoughts that begin in our brain don't just stay in the brain. They literally travel into the body as energy, and they impact either energize or diminish physical ability. For example, not so long ago, working with a young volleyball player who was starting and then she wasn't starting. We're practicing this catching thoughts, and she has thoughts, I can't serve anymore. And then she's noticing not only is she having the thought, I can't serve, but she's discovering that something's going on with her right arm and shoulder and her hand, so she can't even get her physical body to go through spontaneously, smoothly, skillfully the serving motion that she had used for most of her young life. So it's just a classic example of thoughts start in your head but travel into your body, and if they are thoughts about how you don't want to perform, if they're anxious, nervous, stressful thoughts, they diminish your physical ability, connected to the idea that our brain runs our body. So those kinds of thoughts diminish vision, motor coordination, and timing, etc.
Yeah, you've been working with the Oregon State baseball team, and you told me stories about pitchers who would approach a key moment in a game with a mindset that was actually undermining their performance, and how you changed their perspective and perception and hence change the outcome.
That has happened indeed. I mean, I'm just thinking of one top athlete whose permission I have to say his name as I'm teaching. Ben Wetzler was a young true freshman who pitched at Division I college baseball as a starting pitcher and pitched pretty well his first year. And then his second year, as I'm introducing these mental training methods to the team, he comes up and said, I'd like to work with you because I'm tired of fighting my head trying to stay calm. So he's one of those rare athletes that is that moment of self-honesty where he's brave enough to admit that there's some trouble spot for him in performance on the mental, emotional side. So that gives him the power to do something, because we have to break up this myth that the people who come to work with someone about performance challenges, they are the brave and strong ones because they're willing to admit and take action, not the weak ones. Although kids still believe I'm weak. But the point of the story has been then developed a positive performance phrase from fighting my head to stay calm. He began to use the phrase as a mental focus, pound down, a 2-word phrase that when he thought and said that phrase, then his physical body, he was in a relaxed body, calm mind state to execute pitches, pitch after pitch, low in the strike zone. And the fun part of the story, because we're talking about innovative methods, they don't really matter if they don't produce results or they don't last. In the last 2 years of his college career, he won 22 games and lost 2. And so we're also talking about consistent top performance when you actually know how to mentally focus and sustain that focus. And he led the nation in ERA for people who know baseball stats at all, which I know you do, at 0.78 one of the years. And he won a game in the College World Series in 2013. So with that mental focus, I tried to coin the phrase, live in the do zone mentally. And what that really means is you hold the focus on how you do want to perform moment by moment, start to finish.
Now, you were talking about the brain instructing the body what to do. Can you just expand upon the physiological and the chemical, not the chemical, I guess, but the physiological manifestation of that? When your brain is programming your body to act in a certain way, how that actually comes to be.
But you can kind of separate the thinking brain. The cortex is a thinking part of our brain, and then the emotional part of our brain. which has to do with our nervous system. And not to get too technical, and I'm not an expert in brain science, but I do understand it enough to understand that if we have a performance moment or a challenge or a failure moment that kids remember, like giving up a home run, a key home run in baseball, or a goalie giving up a goal in football and soccer, a quarterback throwing pick six. So they have these don't thoughts that put them in the emotional part of their brain, which I'll then begin from the brain standpoint. We get these stress hormones like cortisol, and our brain and body are flooded with stress and tension from head to toe. And so, again, vision is impacted in those moments, and coordination and timing, etc. So it's a cascading effect physiologically, beginning with what is happening in the brain. And conversely, when we are in a calm mind and we have our thinking brain, our cortex online, then we can create these mental focuses that help us perform the way we want. And as we practice with them, they become more and more automatic. So thinking kind of goes out of the way, or gets out of the way.
So it's not a light switch. It's that word practice you used. And at the SEC Festival last summer at Dominican University in San Rafael, California, I see you with a shirt that had the word practice written backwards. And I looked at it cryptically and I said, aha, I'm not dyslexic, nor are you, but that was a fun moment. Tell me about more of that programming the mind. It's not, as I say, not a light switch. You have to do it over time to get those theories and mindset ingrained in your psyche, right?
Right, and I'm trying to build in this languaging, which matters, so that this becomes more familiar. If we talk about, you could do sets of mental focus or catching thoughts. So you could decide, I'm going to spend 2 minutes today catching the thoughts I'm having about how I'm performing lately. And so the playfulness of practice spelled backwards, which is, I think, pronounced Esset Carp. So in that playful way, it's practicing mental training, and it's the idea of, just as you do with your physical skill training, and you do sets in a weight room, where you do wind sprints, or you do repetitions of drills and skills in your sport, the same idea applies in the mental training arena when you have practices and skills and methods that you can actually work at on a daily basis.
Now, tell me, you were quoted as saying, slumps don't have to happen. And what was your follow-up to that? Was an emotional self-management training. So you have to get into that a little bit for us.
Right. I am trying to do a little bit of myth busting when people get excited about and begin to see, as some of these young athletes do, connecting that when I know how to mentally, emotionally self-manage, then I have poor performance moments rather than slumping performances that may fall across games or weeks or months of a season. And so the point is, we have methods now that I teach that get you to a relaxed body, calm mind state quickly enough that you can have just a moment of poor performance, but it doesn't have to live in your mind and body. I mean, for example, I remember Jim Furyk in golf. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. He, as a pro golfer, he led 6 golf tournaments going into the final round, and he lost all 6. And I thought, I'd sure like to have a conversation with him if he understood that whatever thinking he's doing is in that final round, that's starting in his brain but beginning to impact his and diminish his physical abilities to execute shots, that he could learn some methods to clear that upset emotional energy out of his mind-body system and get back to a relaxed body, calm mind to execute in the final round.
Yeah, no question about it. I imagine the more it happened, the more he was programming his mind to believe it would continue to happen. So he became his own worst enemy despite his best intentions.
Well, and again, the good news is, from a brain science standpoint, is we now know how and why that happens, and that that's getting more and more clear about thoughts start in your brain and travel into your body, that we actually can reproduce those poor performance moments at a cell level. So it's going on in our body that we're already kind of mentally, emotionally prepared to fail, if you will, for lack of a better word, or not be able to get relaxed and win like they have been.
What's that phrase about creating the life you want to live? But you can also inadvertently, or not with intent, create the anxiety or the anxiousness, if you will, in a given moment to undermine your ability to have peak performance.
Absolutely, that is what happens. So you're being bumped out of your thinking mind into your emotional mind, and then the body and nervous system is stressed and anxious, and we all know what stress and anxiety does to physical abilities. I think we do. It certainly diminishes them.
Now, you've worked with a program called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. It's a what you call power tapping, and tell us what that's all about.
Well, in 2000, I guess it was, I started looking into, because I began to understand both in psychology and mental health as well as sport, if we have performance moments that feel like failures to us as individuals, that becomes emotional enough that just thinking and talking about it doesn't resolve it. So I went looking for who's doing what in the field of psychology and therapy, and besides talking to people who are upset. And so I discovered a field called energy psychology. And what that really meant was the psychology field met the acupuncture system, and began to pay attention to mind-body aspects of the natural energy flows that do occur in the human body. And that was a way to kind of talk to the body by activating acupuncture points or energy points. And the point of it, and the single sentence theory, is that when we have ongoing performance challenges or poor performances or slumps, that it has more to do with blocked energy in our mind-body system than it has to do with lack of willpower or determination or a bad attitude. And so we can teach people pretty quickly how to physically tap or massage a few energy points on the body and face and hands, that then clears out the emotional upset from past life issues or performances.
So
it's called the emotional freedom technique, the one
and you're getting the negative mindset out of the way and allowing. It's almost like you get a tune-up. You're opening the carburetor. You're getting the full flow of the body, mind, spirit to maximize your performance.
That is what's happening, and it's useful just kind of metaphorically and realistically at some level to begin to envision an energy circulation, just like you have blood circulation. We want oxygen-rich blood flowing from head to toe through clean veins and arteries. A vein or artery gets blocked, bad things happen. In this energy system, science has basically proven that we have 14 lines of energy or meridians that flow through our entire body, from head to toe, through all your muscle groups, major organs, joints, and affects the neurochemistry of your brain. And so the key is to keep your energy system clear and clean, just like you do want to do for your blood circulation.
Is this scientifically quantifiable? Is it measurable? And if so, how can you do like a before and after to show somebody in a blocked mental state and then someone in a liberated or open mental mind state?
It's a fair question, and science is growing, body of science is growing to prove it. I mean, one way to understand it and is to experience it and do it, as far as an athlete comparing whether or not they're a relaxed body, calm mind, or they're tense and anxious. But there is in the medical literature with acupuncture, they've actually been able to show decreases in the emotion and blood flow to the emotional part of the brain, meaning that someone who'd been anxious and stressed out is able to relax because of this flow of energy lines of energy being opened up and clear.
You've used a phrase called energy psychology, and that's a new one for me. It's probably a new one for a lot of people. Is this part of what you're speaking about?
Yes, that's a field that's been around for about 40 years. At the same time, it's not well known. And so I am one of the early people back a decade ago who started bringing this energy psychology. Under the energy psychology umbrella, there are many methods and approaches. The one I choose to teach is the emotional freedom technique, or popularly called EFT or EFT tapping. And it's about accessing the energy system to basically to relax the body, calm the mind in dependable ways. And so it is an actual field of study now. It's a growing field. It's being approved for continuing education credits. And so we're not experimenting anymore. I am looking for open-minded young athletes and coaches who want to consider adding some tools, not replacing what they're doing, but adding some mental training practices that give their athletes that complete sense of managing mind and body.
So you talked about power tapping and the idea of hitting the chakras or the energy points, the acupuncture points in the body. What is actually manifesting when you do that? And giving yourself this mantra: I am peaceful, I am calm, I am positive, I am going to win this game because I am the bigger, stronger, better man or woman or whatever. Well, what are the messages?
Yeah, that's actually not where you start, but the point is taken. So if you imagine a garden hose laying out all winter, and someone said, "Would you hook up that garden hose and water the garden?" and little sticks and bugs and critters run out of the water. As you move water through the line clears. So literally physically tapping these energy points is moving energy. The percussing creates a flow of energy in the body or in that particular meridian, or the baseball guys gave me the phrase energy line to make it a little bit more common and understandable. A microtubule or a vessel is basically carrying primarily electromagnetic energy that's natural to the body and healing in nature. And it's useful for mental, emotional, and physical challenges. So for example, to illustrate and not just talk about it, anytime I'm preparing for a performance, which this I happen to consider a performance, being in this interview with you, I ask myself, when I tell myself the truth, how am I thinking about and feeling heading into the interview? And I notice I'm nervous. So what can I do about that? In the old days, I would just wait, wish, and hope it went away. Nowadays, I can quickly and easily go admitting nervous, create a thought field. I'm thinking about and admitting what's going on in the moment. It's not being negative. It's just admitting this is happening, the nerves. So I'm tapping like this, feeling nervous, a little bit nervous. Can't believe I'm nervous again. I've talked about this a million times. Nervous. So I can do these points, and then I be still. They take about a minute. And then to read my body again, part of mental training is the ability to read your body from head to toe for relaxation or tension. And then if I have a sense that I'm basically calm, then I shift to my positive performance phrase, which is to be clear-minded and have fun. And I can tap for that. I choose to be clear-minded and have fun from start to finish for this interview. And so I'm showing you this because I say to everybody I teach, I only teach methods that I personally use and that I know work well for most people.
You've heard the phrase about negative adrenaline, not the phrase, but the reference of a negative adrenaline versus what most people presume is a positive consideration of adrenaline. You know, oh, he had adrenaline flowing. Well, there's positive and negative adrenaline, and as I mentioned, the negative adrenaline is that anxiety or the stage fright or being under the pressure that you feel too massive to overcome, that you can kind of, I don't want to say purge, but you can let go of. Is that a fair way to assess it?
That is a fair way to assess it, and that is what happens. We're not talking about wiping out memory. We're talking about clearing a built-up emotional charge. The old boiling tea kettle idea is useful in this context, and that is that we have these emotions building up in our system, and they're compromising physical abilities in many, many ways. So this physically activating energy points literally facilitates the letting go, the clearing out of the upset energy that's in your mind body.
Now, is it something that could be instantaneous in the realization or the results, or does it take a prolonged process of doing this to achieve the ends?
Thank you for that question, and it's both. Sometimes it is quite instant. For example, I can teach people to tap the point at the side of their thumb, which is the meridian or energy line to your lungs. Tap inside little finger by the fingernail. It's the energy line and meridian to your heart. So literally just alternating tapping thumb and little finger smooths out heart rate and breathing. So some of the athletes, relief pitchers, might do this in the bullpen before they come into the game as a quick, dependable way to relax your body and calm your mind. And I mean, last year, one of the top hitters for Oregon State University, who had a phenomenal, fun season, won 56 games and lost 6. One of their best hitters told me, I know about thinking and positive thinking. I know about breathing, and I like the tapping before I hit, because this is what physically enables me to relax. Dependably, I can count on it. So I don't have to think my way to calm. I can tap these points in 30 to 60 seconds and dependably relax my body, calm my mind, and be ready to play.
Well, that's fascinating stuff, Greg. And I also know that you've been working with young children who have faced either traumas or divorce and worse. So tell me how your program of emotional freedom technique has worked with children and anyone with post-traumatic stress issues.
Absolutely. And again, the application of the tapping from a traumatic or trauma standpoint, when young people of any age or people of any age have something happens or something triggers a traumatic emotional memory, then they're not able to think and process. It feels out of control and frightening, especially for children. And so I can teach them to physically tap some energy points so that they can get the scared, anxious, sometimes terror-based feeling energy out of their mind and body, so they can kind of think and process again and decide what they can do to get on with living their lives, even though they have experienced abuse or neglect or both.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, is that a process that takes a fair measure of time for young children whose minds obviously are not as developed and as psyche, and they're more fragile to begin with and in the fledgling states of development, and then to be traumatized from abuse or any number of horrors that are out there in the world? How does that process work for children compared to adults?
Well, I don't think age matters as much as everyone is different. And so partly it's how engaged the person is, how willing they are to experiment and try something new and actually do it. And then actually do the physical tapping. Sometimes it's pretty quickly we can clear out the emotional charge of some of the upset in a session or two. Other times it does take longer. So I don't want to oversell the tapping as a panacea, which the field has had a tendency to do. The emotional freedom techniques is a very useful tool for mentally, emotionally self-managing, in part because it's something you can physically do to dependably relax your mind and body.
And if I may also bring into the conversation the fact that you yourself had a tremendous trauma, a serious motorcycle accident more than half a lifetime ago that cost you a leg, and how you were able to work through that. Were some of your understandings and learnings applicable to your recovery and ascension?
But interesting enough, they were, but I couldn't have named them then. By the way, I only lost half a leg.
Okay, well, that's a half more than most people want to ever hear. That's still very traumatic.
That matters. The knee joint is helpful. But what I would say about that is at age 27, interesting enough, I had just run the first full marathon. I had loved running that summer, so I was in super condition, which mattered. But I can look back now, and in the marathon I ran, I had a positive phrase. I was coached, don't go out with the rabbits in the first marathon or you won't finish. So I had this positive phrase of run at my training pace, 26 miles. And when I finished and I did the math, I ran within a second or two of my training pace. Then later that summer, I had the accident, and people haven't really believed me over time. I spent no time being angry and resentful and blaming and why me, it's not fair. I asked one question, and I teach this also connected to mental emotional self-managing. It's the value of a quality question. So for whatever reason, at age 27, I knew to ask the question, what do I have to do now to live a productive life? And that the instant we ask a good question or any question, our mind goes to work answering it. So with that question, it kept me focusing on next steps because life was not over. I was just shorter on one side. I can tease it out. But
well, who was your mentor and who guided you through those tough times?
It's absolutely a fair question, and because both my parents died young, as well as my grandparents, my mentors were books. I've been reading and studying since I was 12 years old. Self-help books. Mm-hmm. I absolutely value having mentors. I think that's invaluable, real life.
So it sounds as though you brought an Eastern philosophy on life and living to a Western existence.
Absolutely. You said it better than I could. And that is what I have done. And I've been in these places of innovation and kind of on the front edge because I'm always looking for what helps people, what's actually useful. So 30 years ago in the counseling psychology field, the focus was on pathology and trying to figure out what's wrong with you and why. And I ran into a new approach called solution-focused therapy, which happened to be a radical idea on the other side of the coin, and that is that we can help people live better lives without a predominant focus on problems.
Right. More causal than dealing with symptoms, which is all too common an approach in the conventional old Western view or paradigm, if you will.
Right. And so I've learned the journey of being different. And I have coined the phrase, I have to keep my perseverance spirit on, because sometimes it's a lonely journey. Bringing energy psychology and EFT into sports for a while has been a kind of a lonely journey, in the sense that people don't know about it, and innovations don't catch on for a while, and they're fought against and defended against, and then all of a sudden we get to that place. What I'm excited about where we're at now with what we're doing with the Sports Energy Consciousness Group and SEC is there is this public conversation about sport being way beyond competition, only beating up the other guy, and that there's a mind-body aspect, there's a higher consciousness aspect, there's an energetic aspect to athletes, and sports is certainly one wonderful best bridge to creating public conversations about what's beyond in our future, what's even more better than the old ways.
Well, like many artists whose work is not appreciated until they're gone, you're a pioneer in sports energy, and perhaps the full appreciation won't be coming until further down the road, when people take your torch and run with it that much, farther and faster and whatnot. But they wouldn't have gotten there without your putting that first shovel in the ground, if you will.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that.
It's been great talking with you, Greg Warburton. Keep up the great work.
I intend to, and thank you very much for your time and energy for us.
All good.
Bye for now.
Thanks, Al, buddy. All the best.